Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? Mitchell sat straight-backed, silent, her notes precise, her rifle case leaning against the wall beside her. Around her, hardened SEAL operators traded quiet remarks, their voices threaded with skepticism that they weren't even trying to hide. She heard the chuckles, the murmurs. A woman, a replacement, a question mark in a war zone where question marks could kill. Master Chief Mason Adams, by 2 decades of war, didn't look at her directly, but his tone when he introduced her carried the same weight as the stares in the room. "This is Lieutenant Mitchell. She'll be your overwatch." He didn't say sniper, didn't say protector, just a sterile assignment stripped of trust. His pen moved across the map, marking elevations, calculating lines of fire, nodding wind vectors. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was calm, professional. "Ridge Point Alpha gives me 1,200 meters to the compound, with blind coverage over your route. Crosswinds from the northwest, averaging 8 knots. I'll compensate." One of the younger SEALs smirked. "That thing's almost bigger than she is." Laughter, sharp and dismissive. Mason didn't correct them. He let the joke hang in the air. Kept writing, kept calculating. Her mother had taught her that silence often carried more weight than any retort. She let them laugh. Let them think what they wanted. The math never lied. But inside, a familiar ache stirred. Not anger, not even humiliation. Just the echo of years of proving herself in every room she entered. She had carried that rifle longer than some of these men had carried their own burdens. She knew what it meant to lie in the dirt for 20 hours without moving, to let ants crawl across her skin while she slowed her breathing enough to match the earth itself. But here, at this table, she was still the girl. And Mason's eyes told her everything. He wasn't just skeptical, he was haunted. That night in the solitude of her assigned quarters laid thee on a cloth, breaking it down with the practiced rhythm of ritual. The rifle's pieces gleamed under the dim light, not just steel, not just mechanics, but inheritance. From beneath her bunk she pulled a smaller, older case. Inside lay her mother's rifle, worn but cared for, a weapon that carried a story written in blood and sacrifice. She opened her father's leather-bound journal, edges yellowed from years of field dust. Ballistic tables, hand-drawn wind corrections, notes about shots fired under stress. Every page smelled faintly of oil and desert heat. Her father had died when she was a child, his body returned under a flag. Her mother had followed years later, her name etched into legend for 20 confirmed kills in a single operation, a record no one had touched since. His fingers traced the initials on the journal's cover, J.M. James Mitchell, and inside her chest, something heavy pressed outward, the memory of her parents' voices, the weight of their unfinished legacies. The team didn't know. Mason didn't know. No one here knew what it meant for her to be carrying both of their shadows into this mission. She didn't tell them because she didn't need to. Not yet. Tomorrow, she thought, tomorrow the rifle will speak for me. The next afternoon, under a brutal Afghan sun, stood on the firing range with her rifle mounted against a bipod. Mason stood behind her, arms folded, his gaze sharp as a scalpel. The team had gathered, not out of duty but curiosity, waiting to see if the girl would embarrass herself. "Range 1,200 meters, the spotter announced. Didn't reply. She didn't need to. She already knew the air density, already knew the drop of the round at that distance. Her father's tables whispered in her mind, her mother's voice reminding her, the mind is the weapon. The rifle is only the hand that carries it. The thundered, its recoil rippling through her shoulder. Dust lifted from the earth where the target had been, except the target wasn't just hit. The center mass was gone, shredded by the impact. The spotter's voice cracked, hit center. Before the shock could fade, chambered again, adjusted one fraction for the wind, fired. Another target shattered. She worked through the magazine with machine-like rhythm. 10 rounds, 10 precise hits, each no more than 2 inches off perfection. Silence hung over the range like smoke. The smirking SEALs had no jokes left. Even Mason, arms still folded, found his expression harder to control. He wanted to dismiss it, wanted to say paper didn't shoot back. But even he had seen enough to know this wasn't luck. This was mastery. Still, his voice came cold. "Not bad, Lieutenant, but out there targets shoot back." Packed her rifle without answering. She had heard the same line 100 times, and every time the battlefield had given her the answer. That night Mason sat in Colonel's office, his jaw tight as the Colonel slid new intel across the desk. The compound wasn't just guarded, it was reinforced, and somewhere out there in those ridges, a counter-sniper waited, a hunter who specialized in killing Overwatch. His eyes hardened. That's why Mitchell is here. She's not just any sniper, she's Mitchell's daughter. The words landed like stone in Mason's gut. He knew the name. He remembered the operation. 20 kills before an RPG brought down her position. He remembered the young girl who had stood shyly with a medal, her mother's pride shining in her eyes. And now, 15 years later, that girl sat in his briefing room, rifle at her side, ready to carry her mother's ghost into the mountains. Mason didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. Ghosts had come back, and he was about to lead them into war again. Alone in her quarters, whispered into the silence, "I'll make you proud, Mom." Why did Mason hesitate before giving the order? The SEAL team crouched in the dark belly of the U-60, their gear strapped, weapons checked, faces painted in the muted green of night operations. The helicopter's blades thumped like a heartbeat over the Afghan mountains, muffled by the black technology designed to make them ghosts in the sky. But inside the cabin, the silence was heavier than the sound. Mason's eyes drifted down the line of his men. Hardened veterans, every one of them, each face familiar, reliable. And then hers. Mitchell, call sign Hawk, sitting near the tail ramp. She cradled her like it was part of her body, her face painted into a mask that erased all softness. But Mason still saw the girl, saw her mother, saw. The pilot's voice crackled in the headset. 5 minutes to drop. Mason clicked his mic. Comms check. One by one, voices answered. Calm, clipped, professional. When's voice came last, it was steady, even almost too calm. Overwatch ready. Mason leaned forward, speaking low enough that only she could hear. Listen carefully. The enemy brought in a sniper. He's killed 6 coalition operators in 4 months. If you detect him, you report. You don't engage without my order. Turned her head, eyes dark beneath the camouflage paint. Counter-sniper operations were my specialty, Master Chief. If he's out there, I'll find him before he finds us. Her tone wasn't bravado, it was fact. And Mason hated the way it sounded like Mitchell all over again. He exhaled through his nose, a controlled release of frustration. Just stay alive, Lieutenant. That's an order. The bird dipped. The mountains opened beneath them, black ridges and shadowed valleys. The landing zone loomed, a clearing no wider than a football field, ringed by jagged rock. The skimmed low kissed the ground for only seconds and then lifted again, vanishing back into the night. The team fanned out, moving like phantoms. Separated, heading for the ridge line designated as her nest. Mason watched her go. The rifle case across her back looked absurd against her small frame, yet she moved as though it weighed nothing. Doc leaned close. "She'll be fine, boss. You know that, right?" Mason grunted, not answering. Fine wasn't what haunted him. History repeating itself was. Climbed in silence. Each footstep deliberate, careful not to send a pebble clattering down the slope. The mountain embraced her like an old teacher, every shadow familiar, every rock an ally. She found the ridge, chose her angle, and began the ritual. First then the spotting scope. Then the journal laid open to fresh notes. Wind, temperature, pressure, she recorded everything. Through night optics, the valley below came alive. The target compound, huddled against the slope, flickered with movement. Guards walked lazy circles. Civilians moved in the shadows. The pattern revealed itself slowly, like a puzzle only she had the patience to solve. Overwatch in position, she whispered into comms. 14 armed on perimeter, no visual on HVT yet. Copy, Mason replied. Team approaching from the east, 20 minutes. Scanned the surrounding ridges, looking for the hunter she knew had to be there. Her mother's words guided her. Don't look where you'd hide, look where you wouldn't. Her scope slid across barren rock, across shadows, across a jagged outcrop. Something unnatural caught her eye. A shadow that didn't move with the wind. She froze, stared, waited. There, just a flicker of glass, a sniper's mistake. Actual overwatch. Possible counter-sniper, Western Ridge, 800 meters, cave position. Mason's voice was tight. Negative confirmation. Maintain overwatch, do not engage. Breath slow, she understood. But she also knew, if she was right, every man on Mason's team was walking into that rifle's sights. She whispered under her breath, not tonight. Minutes passed. The team crept closer. Mason signaled halt, scanning the compound through NVGs. The intel was wrong. Too many guards, twice what they'd expected. His jaw clenched. Overwatch, confirm count. 18 armed, 2 at main entrance, rotating patrols, courtyard guards stationary, HVT likely inside main structure. Her precision grated at him, not because she was wrong, but because she was. She was thorough, just like. Copy, he muttered. We proceed as planned. The team shifted into assault positions, but then's voice cut in, urgent. Actual hold, vehicle inbound, Southern Road, 6 armed mounted MG, ETA 90 seconds. Mason swore under his breath. Reinforcements, not in the briefing. He scanned the terrain. If they entered the compound, his team would be overrun before the breach. His voice was calm, steady. I can disable the vehicle, 1 shot. Mason hesitated. A shot would blow their cover. The valley would erupt before they even breached, but letting that truck reach the compound meant suicide. His choice wasn't really a choice. Do it, disable only, make it count. Copy. Her breathing slowed, heart rate dropped, she exhaled and squeezed, the thundered. Through Mason's NVGs, sparks lit the night as the vehicle's engine block disintegrated. The truck veered, flipped, and rolled. Armed men tumbled onto the dirt road, stunned, weapons scattering. Vehicle disabled, occupants mobile, machine gun destroyed. The silence after the shot lasted seconds. Then alarms wailed through the compound. Guards shouted, doors slammed, fighters scrambled. Mason didn't hesitate. Our cover's blown, full breach, immediate action, move. The team surged. Suppressed rifles barked in the dark. Explosions rocked the compound walls. Mason moved like a machine, each step, each shot practiced through years of repetition. But in his ear's voice was the constant thread. Roof movement, 2 targets setting up heavy MG, taking shot. Thunder, targets eliminated. 3 tangos east courtyard, converging on your position. Thunder, 2 down, 3rd approaching your 6. Mason pivoted, fired, the fighter fell. Every shot she fired was precise, measured. Not frantic, not rushed, it was surgical. Inside the compound they found him, the HVT, middle-aged, sweating, trying to burn documents in a tin can. His eyes widened when Mason called his name. They secured him, zip-tied his wrists. But outside, the valley roared with fighters closing in. Actual multiple hostiles converging, 8 minimum, can't cover all angles. Copy, Mason growled. Team, defensive perimeter, hold the building. Gunfire rained against the walls. Mason's men fought like demons, but he knew it, numbers would drown them. Extraction was the only hope. Overwatch, I need a route. Scope swept fast but controlled. South and east too hot. Northwest corner clear, low activity. I can cover you from there. Mason nodded. All teams move northwest on my mark. But wasn't finished. Actual enemy sniper confirmed. Western Ridge cave hide, adjusting position now. Mason's blood went cold. That rifle could slaughter his men as they broke cover. Negative. Maintain overwatch. Master Chief's tone was sharp but steady. If I don't neutralize him now, he'll cut you down during extraction. Mason clenched his teeth. Her voice was, again, echoing across decades. He hated it, feared it, but he knew she was right. You're certain? Yes, no hesitation, just certainty. A long silence. Then, do it fast. We move in 3 minutes with or without your cover. Copy, engaging now. Adjusted. The angle was brutal, the wind unpredictable, the cave shrouded in shadows, but she had seen enough. She had been trained for this moment since she was 8 years old. She slowed her breath, felt her heartbeat steady, focused on the faintest glint of metal. And fired. The roared across the valley. For a second, nothing. Then a rifle tumbled from the cave mouth. A body followed, rolling limply down the slope. Enemy sniper neutralized, she whispered. Mason's reply came low, almost reluctant. Copy that, overwatch, moving to extraction. Swung her scope back to the compound, covered their retreat. One by one, fighters fell, each shot placed with perfect calm. Her kill count rose, but she didn't think about the number. She thought about her mother, about the ghost who still walked with her in every trigger pull. Somewhere deep inside, a truth took root. Tonight would not end the way history had before, not if she could help it. What happens when the hunter becomes the hunted? The mountains swallowed the sound of gunfire, bouncing echoes back like ghosts. Mason's team pushed through the compound, dragging their captive, weapons barking in short, controlled bursts. Every corner was danger. Every shadow another rifle raised against them. But above it all, steady as a drumbeat, came's voice in their ears. 2 fighters, roofline north side, taking shot. Thunder, a pause. Targets eliminated, move now. Her calmness cut through the chaos, a tether Mason hadn't realized he was clinging to. He wanted to deny it, wanted to tell himself she was just another operator doing her job, but every word, every shot reminded him of someone else. Mitchell's ghost was speaking again, through her daughter's voice. Inside the compound's main building, Mason's men swept rooms with ruthless precision. The prisoner sat bound in the corner, his eyes filled with loathing but no fight. Papers burned in metal cans, half-legible maps scattered on the floor, radios smashed under boots. The mission was already costly, noise, exposure, reinforcements closing in. But abandoning now would mean failure. Outside tracked movement with an unflinching eye. Her scope slid across the valley, cataloging threats faster than any software. Each decision was calculation, not impulse. Which target had the best angle on the seals? Which posed the greatest threat to extraction? Who could she ignore long enough to deal with later? Actual 3 tangos east wall, coordinating flanking maneuver. 10 seconds until contact. Mason swore under his breath. His voice snapped back over comms. Copy, suppress. The roared again. 1 fighter dropped instantly. The second ducked for cover but never rose again. The third stumbled into the open, confused by the sudden disappearance of his comrades. Mason's men finished him before even needed to fire. East wall clear, she reported. Her count ticked higher. 10 kills, 11, 12, but numbers didn't matter yet, only survival. Master Chief, Davis shouted from the stairwell. They're setting up on the roof again. Mason spun. The thunder rolled above them before he even gave the order, had already seen it, already stopped it. Roof threats neutralized, her voice said calm, almost detached. Proceed. Mason froze for the briefest moment. He hated the way relief washed through him at her words, hated how much weight he was placing on someone he had doubted hours earlier. But doubt had no place here, only trust. He signaled the team, prep for north route now. Outside, the Taliban regrouped. The valley was alive with shouts, gunfire rattling from a dozen directions. Tracers cut the night, glowing arcs of death. Mason led his men into the chaos, dragging between them, moving low and fast. His voice kept them alive. 4 tangos, your 11 o'clock stone wall. Thunder, 1 down, 2 suppressed, 3rd breaking left. Gunfire crackled. Mason cut the last man down. Vehicle inbound from east, 3 occupants, RPG visible. Thunder, sparks erupted from the engine block as the found its mark. Vehicle disabled, occupants disoriented. She was everywhere at once, eyes in the dark, guardian in the ridges. Mason had worked with the best, but this was something else. Still the valley pressed harder. More fighters, more fire, more chaos. The ground shook with the force of RPGs hitting too close. Mason could feel his team fraying at the edges. Then's voice cut sharper than before, urgent, focused. Actual large force approaching from north. At least 10, armed with heavy weapons. They'll reach the LZ before you do. Mason's gut tightened. The landing zone was their only escape. If they lost it, they were trapped. Can you delay them? Affirmative. Shifted her scope. The group moved quickly, led by a tall fighter barking orders. She steadied her breathing. 1, 2, 3. The leader dropped first, then the heavy machine gunner, then the RPG carrier. The group faltered, confused, but didn't stop. She accelerated her rhythm, pushing her limits. Each shot timed between breaths. Each trigger squeeze a thread pulled from the fabric of their advance. 15 confirmed, she whispered. 6 remaining. I can't get all of them before they reach the LZ. Copy, Mason said, voice hard. We'll handle the rest, just keep them confused. His barrel glowed faintly in her scope's night optics, heat shimmering from the steel. The rifle had been pushed harder tonight than most snipers pushed in a year. But she didn't flinch, didn't pause. She was her mother's daughter. This was what she had been born into. At the LZ, the appeared like salvation against the night. Its rotors whipped the dust into storms, its lights flicking like fireflies. Mason waved his men forward, forcing ahead. Overwatch status. 20 confirmed kills, answered. Her voice was level, but inside her chest her heart hammered. One more, and her mother's record would fall. But records didn't matter. The team did. Survival did. Then she saw him. Another RPG gunner sprinting into position, his launcher already rising toward thee as it descended. She adjusted fast. Wind was gusting. The barrel was near thermal redline. The shot was beyond difficult, borderline impossible. Her father's notes whispered in her ear. Her mother's voice steadied her hands. She squeezed. The roared. The RPG gunner collapsed, launcher firing harmlessly into dirt. RPG threat neutralized, said. Her voice never wavered. 21 confirmed kills. Silence followed her words, not disbelief, not awe, just silence heavy with meaning. Mason turned, dragging into the waiting helicopter. For one moment, through the dust and chaos, his eyes locked on silhouette up on the ridge. And for the first time in 15 years, the weight on his chest shifted. Mitchell's record had stood unchallenged for over a decade. Tonight, her daughter had surpassed it. But didn't celebrate, didn't smile. She simply broke down her rifle, methodical even under fire, and began the long walk down to her secondary extraction point. Because numbers weren't the victory. Survival was. The team was alive. That was enough. Why did victory feel so hollow? The rotors still thundered in his ears long after the lifted away with Mason's team and the prisoner. Alone on the ridge, she crouched in the silence that followed, packing her rifle into its case with deliberate, steady movements. Her hands were calm, her breath controlled, but inside, something fragile trembled. 21 kills. She had done what no one believed she could. She had broken her mother's record, shattered it in the heat of fire. Yet the mountain didn't care. The dead men on the valley floor didn't care. And when the radio static cleared, she heard Mason's voice one last time. Overwatch, proceed to secondary extraction. We'll see you back at base. That was it. No acknowledgement, no weight in his tone, just orders. She closed the case, slung it across her back, and began the descent. Every step felt heavier than the last. Rocks shifted under her boots. The silence of the valley pressed against her skin. She thought about her mother, how proud she'd been of her rifle, of her role. Had imagined this moment her entire life, surpassing that legendary number, carving her own name into history. But standing here, drenched in sweat and dust, she felt no triumph. Just emptiness. By the time she reached the extraction point, her legs ached. A second waited, its crew tense, scanning the night with mounted weapons. Climbed aboard without a word, collapsing onto the bench, her rifle across her knees. The door gunners glanced at her, then looked away. To them, she was just another operator returning from the field. No one saw the ghost that clung to her shoulders. Back at the forward operating base, the team staggered off the first bird. Mason led them, prisoner in tow, face lined with exhaustion. When he saw her step onto the tarmac from the second helicopter, their eyes met for a heartbeat. His jaw tightened. He turned away. The debrief dragged until dawn. Colonel spoke of success, of objectives achieved, of intelligence recovered. He commended the team for their precision, their endurance. Then, almost as an afterthought, his gaze slid to and Lieutenant Mitchell, outstanding overwatch, 21 confirmed kills. The room went silent. The number hung in the air, heavier than the dust. Some of the SEALs looked at her with new eyes, others with unease. Mason's expression never changed, but his silence said enough. When the colonel dismissed them, rose quietly, ready to leave. That's when Mason spoke for the first time since the ridge. "Mitchell, my office." The words weren't a request, they were a summons. Inside, the air was stale. Mason leaned against his desk, arms crossed, eyes locked on her with a mixture of judgment and something she couldn't quite name. 21, he said finally. The word carried weight, accusation. "You understand what that means?" His voice stayed steady. "It means your team made it out alive. It means you've put yourself on every in this region. It means they'll be hunting you now. A sniper who racks up numbers like that, they'll paint your face on the walls of their compounds." She didn't flinch. "They'd have hunted us anyway. Better they fear my rifle than underestimate it." Mason pushed off the desk, stepping closer, his voice low. "You think you proved something out there, to me, to them. You're walking the same road your mother did, and I buried her." The words cut sharper than any bullet. His breath caught, but she forced her voice calm. "You don't know what road I'm walking, Master Chief. My mother died because she was abandoned on a rooftop. That wasn't her choice. That was the team." For the first time, Mason's mask cracked. His eyes flared, pain flashing raw beneath the surface. He looked away, jaw tight, like her words had struck something buried deep. Pressed on. "You want to keep seeing her when you look at me, fine, but don't mistake me for her ghost. I'm here now. I kept your men alive, that's what matters." Silence stretched between them, heavy, unresolved. Mason finally exhaled, a slow release like he'd been holding something for years. "Get some rest, Lieutenant. You'll need it." Dismissed just like that. Walked out, her chest tight, her throat burning. She wanted to scream, wanted to demand more than dismissal, more than silence. But she knew better. The battlefield wasn't where respect was spoken. It was where it was earned. Later in her quarters, she unzipped her gear and winced. A strip of blood had soaked through her shirt, hidden under the adrenaline. A grazing wound, likely from shrapnel. Not fatal, not even serious, but it hurt. She cleaned it herself, stitched it with practiced hands, never calling for a medic. She couldn't show weakness. Not here, not now. When she finally lay back on her bunk, her mother's journal rested on the nightstand. She opened it to a random page. Her mother's handwriting stared back at her. "The rifle never asks why. It only asks if you're steady enough to hold it. The rest is yours to carry." Closed her eyes, whispering into the silence. "I'm steady, Mom, I always was." But sleep didn't come easy. Behind her eyelids, she saw every face she had put into the dirt that night. 21 of them. each falling in silence, each a ghost now walking beside her. The base bustled the next morning, news of the mission already spreading. Some operators looked at her differently, nodding with respect. Others avoided her gaze, unsettled by the number, by the quiet way she carried it. At the mess hall, one of the younger SEALs, the same who had mocked her before the briefing, sat across from her. His voice was quieter now. "We'd be dead if it weren't for you. Just wanted to say that." Nodded once, she didn't smile. Gratitude didn't erase the ghosts. Across the room, Mason watched. His coffee went cold as his thoughts churned. He saw her sitting there, straight-backed, alone, bearing the same quiet weight had once carried. He hated it, but he couldn't deny it anymore. She wasn't a question mark. She wasn't a replacement. She was the reason his men had come home. And that terrified him more than anything. Why did the hallways fall silent when she walked through? Noticed it first the morning after the debrief. Operators who usually filled the air with banter now kept their voices low, eyes trailing her with a mixture of caution and curiosity. She carried her tray through the mess hall, boots heavy on the concrete floor, and every clatter of fork and knife seemed to quiet in her wake. She set her food down alone, as she always did, but this time the silence wasn't just solitude, it was recognition. And recognition could be dangerous. 21. The number had already spread. Not from Mason, but from whispers between men who couldn't believe what they'd witnessed. A record shattered. A woman who had done it. And suddenly the myth of Mitchell had a living echo. Kept her head down, focusing on the eggs that had long gone cold. Across the room, the same young SEAL who had mocked her days before lifted his coffee in a quiet nod. She returned it with nothing more than a glance. Gratitude wasn't what she sought. She didn't need their respect. She needed their trust when it mattered. But trust wasn't born in silence. It was tested in blood. Later in the armory, she cleaned her with ritualistic precision. Each motion was deliberate: brush, cloth, oil, reassemble. The rifle gleamed beneath the fluorescent light but wasn't looking at steel. She was looking at ghosts. Her mother's ghost, smiling as she held the same rifle after a record kill count. Her father's ghost, whispering that precision mattered more than glory. And the new ghosts, 21 pairs of eyes that had stared into her scope before the world went black. She whispered to herself, low enough that no one else could hear, "I didn't do it for numbers. I did it to bring them home." A voice cut through the silence. "Mason. You keep talking to that rifle, Lieutenant. People are gonna start thinking you're losing it." Didn't look up. Better to talk to the rifle than ignore the ghosts it creates. Mason stepped closer, leaning on the workbench, his arms crossed. His face was drawn, shadows beneath his eyes. He hadn't slept, she could see it. "You think you've got this figured out, but numbers like that, they don't leave you clean. You'll carry them longer than you realize." She finally met his gaze. "You think I don't know that? You think I haven't carried ghosts my whole life?" Something flickered in his eyes, guilt. He turned away. His voice softened, not with weakness but with quiet steel. "You were there when my mother fell, weren't you?" Mason froze. His back was to her, but his silence gave the answer. "I read the reports," she continued. "It said the team was overrun. That extraction failed. But reports don't explain why a woman with 20 confirmed kills was left on a rooftop alone." Mason's shoulders stiffened. His voice, when it came, was low and rough. "Because I gave the order to pull back." The admission hung in the air like smoke. His throat tightened, but she forced herself to stay steady. "So that's why you can't look at me, because you see her every time." He turned then, eyes hard but lined with something deeper. Regret. "I see her because I failed her. I see her because I swore I'd never let it happen again. And then you walk in here, her face, her voice, her damn rifle, and you think breaking her record makes you untouchable. It doesn't. It paints a target on your back the size of this base." Stood, her voice calm but sharp. "I didn't break her record for glory. I did it because your men needed to live. If carrying that weight makes me a target, then so be it. I was born carrying it. Mason didn't reply. He couldn't. That night sat on her bunk with her mother's journal open. One line burned into her vision. Respect never comes when you demand it. It comes when you no longer need it. She closed the journal and stared at the ceiling, the hum of generators filling the silence. She thought about Mason's confession, about the guilt he carried like armor. And she thought about the faces of the men she had saved, men who would never fully understand the cost of survival. The next day called Mason into his office. Waited outside, her back against the wall, pretending not to listen, but fragments carried through the door. Propaganda already spreading, enemy channels calling her the widow of the valley. They're circulating her image. Mason's voice sharp. She's compromised. Not compromised, legendary, and legends attract fire. His chest tightened. She hadn't asked for a name, she hadn't asked to be a symbol. But now the enemy had given her one. Widow of the valley, a curse and a crown all at once. That night the whispers grew louder. Some men avoided her altogether, afraid of what the name meant. Others watched her with awe as though she'd become more than flesh and blood. But she knew the truth. She wasn't a myth. She was a woman carrying ghosts. Out on the firing range, she lay prone, lining up shots in the moonlight. Each pull of the trigger echoed too close to memory. 22, 23, numbers stacking like stones on her chest. She wasn't chasing records anymore. She was trying to silence the ghosts that wouldn't leave her alone. Behind her, Mason stood quietly watching. He didn't speak, didn't mock. For the first time, his silence wasn't doubt. It was something else, respect. When she finally rose, wiping sweat from her brow, she looked at him. You can keep carrying her ghost if you want, but I won't carry it for you. I have my own. Mason's jaw tightened, but he gave a single nod. Not agreement, not forgiveness, just acknowledgement. And Ford, that was enough for now. Why did the enemy know her name? His boots crunched against the gravel as she crossed the compound, morning sun cutting through the dust. She was used to the stares by now, some curious, some respectful, others afraid. But this time it wasn't just the men at the base watching her. It was the enemy too. Leaflets had appeared in nearby villages overnight, crude sketches of her face, from blurred satellite footage and shaky propaganda videos. Beneath the image were words in broken English. The widow of the valley, dead or alive. When laid one on Mason's desk, the silence stretched long. Mason stared at the paper, jaw locked, as though he could erase it with sheer will. Stood in the corner, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the wall. They've put a price on you, said, his tone flat but grim. Every fighter in the valley will want a shot at that bounty. His reply was steady. They already did, I just made them pay for it. Mason slammed his fist against the desk. This isn't a joke, Mitchell. You've got every trigger puller from here to Kandahar dreaming of putting your head on a wall. You don't walk through a valley anymore. You carry it. Her voice didn't rise, it didn't waver. If they're looking at me, they're not looking at your men. His gaze shifted between them, heavy with calculation. She's right, fear is a weapon, let them choke on it. But Mason didn't look convinced. He saw something didn't. He saw the toll etched into his eyes, the ghost stacking higher with every whispered name. That evening she sat alone in the barracks, cleaning her rifle by lantern light. The journal lay open beside her. Another line from her mother stared back. Legends don't keep you warm at night. They keep you awake. She didn't need the reminder. She hadn't slept since the mission. The next operation came sooner than anyone expected. Intel pointed to a hidden weapons cache feeding fighters across the region. The team was tasked with raiding it, simple on paper, dangerous in practice. Was assigned Overwatch again. No questions, no hesitation. But as the team moved through the darkened hills, she felt it. The difference. The way the night itself seemed to watch her. She set up on a ridge, scope sweeping the valley. For the first hour, everything felt routine. Guards patrolled, lights flickered. The team moved like shadows. She tracked them, guided them, whispered calm into their ears. Then came the whisper back. Not through comms, not from her team, but from somewhere out there in the dark. A glint, a shimmer, the faintest trace of glass on a distant ridge. Her heart clenched. Counter-sniper again, but this one wasn't sloppy. He wasn't bait. He was patient, watching her, waiting for her. She exhaled slow, forcing calm into her chest. Actual, she whispered. Counter-sniper, West Ridge. He's not watching you. He's watching me. The channel went silent for a beat. Then Mason's voice low. Can you take him? Her hand steadied the rifle. Her mother's journal whispered through her mind. The rifle doesn't ask why, only if you're steady. I can. The shot stretched across the valley like a lifetime. Breath, beat, trigger, thunder. The figure slumped, rifle clattering against the rock. For a moment silence reigned, then whispered, target neutralized. But something about it felt wrong. Too easy, too quick. A second glint, another ridge, another sniper. Her blood went cold. It wasn't one hunter, it was many. Actual ambush, multiple counter-snipers, at least 3. The valley erupted in fire. Tracers cut through the dark sky. RPGs streaked toward the weapon's cache. Mason's men dove for cover as explosions ripped through dirt and steel. His world narrowed to her scope. One shot, then another. Each one precise, each one a duel between hunters. But for every sniper she cut down, another shadow seemed to rise. Actual, they're not here for the cache. They're here for me. Mason's voice snapped back, fierce. Negative, they're here for all of us. You just happen to be the prize. But knew the truth. She could feel it in the rhythm of their fire, in the way their scopes lingered on her position. She wasn't just a target, she was the target. And if she fell, Mason's men would be swallowed whole. Her breathing slowed, she adjusted, she fired. Again and again the roared into the night. Her count ticked higher, but she didn't keep track this time. Numbers didn't matter, survival did. Below, Mason's men fought tooth and nail, their trust in her absolute now. Every order she gave, they followed without hesitation. Every shot she fired carved them a path to live. And still she felt it, the weight, the knowledge that every fighter who came for them tonight wasn't really after the SEALs. They were after the widow of the valley. By dawn, the valley fell silent again. Smoke curled from the wreckage of the cache. Mason's men staggered out, battered but alive. Climbed down from her ridge, her rifle heavy across her back. When she reached them, Mason met her eyes. He didn't speak. Didn't need to. His silence was no longer doubt. It was something harsher, sharper, fear. Because he knew what she knew. She wasn't just part of the mission anymore. She was the mission. Why did the base feel less safe than the battlefield? The ambush in the valley hadn't ended when dawn broke. It followed them home, invisible but heavy, coiled around every corner of the base. Operators glanced at differently now, not just with respect but with unease. She was no longer just another soldier. She was a marked woman, a prize, a threat that drew fire closer to anyone standing near her. At night, the walls shook under mortar fire more often than before. Snipers took shots at the outer perimeters. Drones captured enemy graffiti scrawled on walls in nearby villages. Sketches of her face crossed out in red. The name was spreading faster now. Widow of the Valley. Tried to ignore it. She drilled. She cleaned her rifle. She studied the maps and wind tables like scripture. But when she closed her eyes, she saw more than calculations. She saw her mother, the same nickname whispered in years ago, and now it was hers. One evening, as the desert sky bled into twilight, Mason found her on the range. She lay prone, firing at steel targets 1,000 meters out. Each shot rang like thunder across the sand. "You don't sleep, do you?" he said quietly. Didn't answer. She ejected a magazine, slid in another, and kept firing. The targets clanged one by one. Mason knelt beside her. "They're not going to stop, Mitchell. Every time you fire that rifle, every time you break their lines, you carve your name deeper into their hate. They won't stop until you're in the dirt. Finally looked at him, her eyes cold but steady. Then let them come. But inside she wasn't steady. Inside she felt the weight pressing harder, ghosts piling higher. Days later, the enemy proved Mason right. It was midday when the first explosion ripped through the market street just outside the base. Civilians scattered, smoke rising like a black hand clawing at the sky. The quick reaction force deployed, pulling survivors from the wreckage, treating wounds, clearing debris. Was with them. She lifted a child from the rubble, her arms shaking not from strain but from rage, because this wasn't random. She knew it in her gut. And then she saw it scrawled in fresh paint across the shattered wall of a shop. Her name, in English, Widow. Her chest tightened. This wasn't just about the battlefield anymore. They were targeting her image, her presence, her humanity. That night she sat in her quarters with her mother's journal open on her lap, but the words blurred. For the first time, she couldn't find comfort in the lessons. She whispered into the dark, "How do I carry this, Mom? How do I carry being the reason others bleed?" Silence answered. A knock came at the door. Mason stepped in without waiting. He looked tired, older than his years. He sat across from her, resting his elbows on his knees. "They hit that market because of me," she said, her voice flat. Mason shook his head. "They hit it because they're cowards. Don't give them more power than they deserve." Her eyes burned. "Don't you get it? It's not about the mission anymore. It's about me. Every ghost I make becomes a reason for them to spill more blood. I thought being better, being precise would keep people alive. But now," her voice cracked. She pressed her fists against her eyes, holding back the tremor in her chest. Mason didn't speak at first. He just let the silence stretch. Then quietly he said, "Your mother asked me that once." His hands dropped, her eyes widened. "She asked you what?" "The same question. After her 20th kill, she looked at me and said, 'How do I keep carrying this without drowning in it?' And I didn't have an answer then. Maybe I still don't." His voice roughened, raw with guilt. "But I know this, she carried it because it meant her men went home, same as you did. That's all that matters, not the names they give you, not the records, just the ones who get to see tomorrow." Swallowed hard, the sting in her chest sharp. For the first time, Mason hadn't called her lieutenant. He'd called her. Before she could answer, the alarm blared across the base. Incoming attack. The sky outside erupted with gunfire, tracers stitching the night. Mortar rounds slammed into the perimeter, shaking the earth. And Mason ran, boots pounding the ground. Sirens screamed. Shadows moved against the wire. Fighters were probing the walls, trying to break through. Sprinted to the tower, climbing the ladder 2 rungs at a time. She dropped behind the mounted rifle, scope snapping to her eye. She scanned the ridges. Movement. Dozens of fighters sprinting low across the valley floor, weapons flashing. Her heart pounded, but her hands were steady. She lined up, squeezed, fired. Thunder ripped the night apart. One fighter fell, then another, then another. Mason's voice crackled through comms, fierce and urgent. "They're pushing hard. They want inside. Mitchell, you keep that line cold or we're overrun." She answered with fire. Each shot carved into the waves of fighters. Each kill another ghost added to her shoulders. But she didn't stop, couldn't. Minutes stretched into eternity. The assault pressed harder, bodies piling at the wire. The base shook under the weight of rockets. Fired until her shoulder bruised, until the barrel glowed red, until the magazine ran dry and another slid into place. At last the attackers broke. Survivors fled into the night, dragging their wounded, leaving silence behind them. Smoke hung heavy in the air. The base was battered, but it stood. Climbed down from the tower, her arms shaking, her face streaked with dust and sweat. Mason met her at the bottom. For a long moment he just looked at her, not with doubt, not even with fear, but with something heavier, understanding. You kept us alive, he said, voice low. Again. She nodded once. Her throat was too tight for words. That night she sat on her bunk with the journal open, staring at a blank page. For the first time she picked up a pen. Slowly, carefully, she wrote her own line beneath her mother's words. Sometimes the rifle doesn't just protect, sometimes it curses, and we carry both. She set the pen down, closed the journal, and let the silence settle. Outside, the desert wind howled against the walls, but inside, finally understood. The legend was no longer her mother. It was hers, and it came with a price she could never give back. Why did silence weigh more than gunfire? The desert had gone still again, days after the assault on the base. But silence wasn't peace. It was the uneasy lull that soldiers learned never to trust. Sat alone on the perimeter wall, her rifle across her lap, the horizon painted gold by the setting sun. Dust swirled around her boots. Her body ached from sleepless nights, but it wasn't fatigue that weighed her down. It was the ghosts, always the ghosts. 21 on the ridge, dozens more in the ambush, even more at the base. The number didn't matter anymore. It had become too large to hold. What she carried now wasn't a record. It was a burden. Mason approached quietly, his steps careful on the gravel. He stopped a few feet away, watching her. For once, he didn't speak like a commander. He spoke like a man. "You remind me of her more every day," he said softly. "Not because of the rifle, not because of the kills, but because you never quit, even when it breaks you." His fingers brushed the worn leather cover of her mother's journal. "It doesn't feel like strength, Master Chief. It feels like drowning, like every shot takes something from me I can't get back." He nodded slowly. "That's what no one tells you, that the hardest part isn't pulling the trigger, it's living with the silence after." She turned to him, her voice sharper now. "Then why didn't you tell her? Why didn't you tell my mother before she drowned?" Mason's eyes darkened, shadows of memory flickering across them. "Because I didn't know how. Because I was too damn proud to admit I was drowning too. And by the time I realized it, she was gone." Looked back at the horizon, her throat tight. "And now you think I'll break the same way?" "I think you're stronger than she ever was," Mason said. His voice cracked at the edges like it pained him to admit it. "But strength doesn't mean invincible. Even legends bleed." Silence stretched between them, heavy but not empty. Slowly, opened the journal and handed it to him. Mason hesitated before taking it, running his calloused fingers over the faded ink. He read a few lines, then closed it gently. "She was proud of you, you know," he said. "She talked about you all the time, said you had steadier hands than she ever did, said you'd grow up to do what she couldn't." Swallowed hard, blinking against the sting in her eyes. "And what's that?" Mason looked at her, his voice low but steady. "Carry the weight without letting it crush you." That night the base was quiet, too quiet. Lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening for sounds that never came. No alarms, no gunfire, just silence. She hated it more than the chaos. At dawn, she walked the perimeter again. The desert stretched endless, indifferent, eternal. For the first time, she let herself breathe deeply, not as a sniper, not as a soldier, but as a daughter who had spent her life chasing ghosts. She sat on the wall and wrote in her mother's journal, not calculations, not kill counts, just words. "I thought the rifle would make me strong, but strength isn't in the trigger. It's in carrying what the trigger leaves behind. The ghosts don't vanish. They march beside us, and maybe that's the price of bringing others home." She closed the book and set it gently beside her. Mason found her there hours later, eyes red but steady, rifle at her side. He didn't speak right away. He didn't need to. For the first time, he didn't see Ghost when he looked at. He saw her own shadow, her own strength, her own scars. He sat beside her, the silence between them no longer hostile, just human. Finally, he said, "I mocked you once, asked if you'd even learn to hold a rifle. I was wrong. You didn't just learn to hold it. You learned to carry what comes with it." exhaled the faintest trace of a smile tugging at her lips. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The desert wind carried her words away, scattering them into the endless horizon. The ghosts would remain. The burden would never vanish. But so would the lives she had saved. The men who walked the base alive because she had carried the weight. And for the first time, Mitchell felt something close to peace. Not triumph, not glory, just the quiet strength of knowing she had chosen to carry the rifle and everything it left behind.